I will open the meeting. Welcome everyone to the working session of the Landmark Commission. And thank you to Naylor Wellman for sending along the spreadsheet of neighboring communities and what their ordinances say about owner consent, which is what we will be discussing partially tonight.
Great. Thanks, Maisie. I would just also start with our takeaway from the public meeting was owner consent. That seemed to be the primary issue. I don't know if anybody heard any other comments, but that seemed to be overwhelmingly what we were hearing back. Do any members of the commission have any other issues they felt were touched on? That's where our focus will be tonight. Right? I'm saying no, that's it. Owner consent. Okay, so we'll move to, let me see if okay, share. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, can you just zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, can you make it bigger?
How's that? Better?
A little more. Better? That's better.
Wow.
And you'll just have to scroll.
Okay, then we'll scroll. So based on the feedback that we heard, we had this request several times, we went around and surveyed various CLG communities. The focus was on looking at Northeast Ohio and also major Ohio cities, as well as suburbs of major cities, to try to get some information that would correlate with Cleveland Heights as a suburban community of Cleveland. And it was very interesting looking at this. The CLG communities that were focused on for this, and you can only see South Euclid and Chagrin Falls are the only two non-CLGs. I included Chagrin Falls just because that was a reference point for demolition ordinance that we used. Also included South Euclid. Ken had requested that, and I'll have some comments on that, but they are not a CLG, but they're very much a neighboring community with the Landmarks Commission. If you all, yeah, did somebody have a comment? Okay. If you all had a chance to look at this, very interesting. It was overwhelmingly in favor of no owner consent, but the majority of the ordinances that had no owner consent most often had some level of written owner notification. For example, City of Cleveland was very much like, we're going to make every effort to find that owner and get consent and get them on board. You know, they had that kind of language. Some of these other communities were basically, well, we'll give them notice that there's going to be a public hearing and they can come make comments if they have something to say. You know, I'm paraphrasing what the ordinance was about. Others were actively looking for written comments from owners that would have to be filed for the commission to consider. So there were some variations on the owner notification, I think, where the ordinance is now, the draft that we have now, falls in a nice place where you're making every effort to reach the owner. So we came up with 27 communities that most of which were CLGs that had written owner notification and no owner consent. These were the ones that we have found owner consent was required, fit in our parameters of either a major city or around a major city. We also tried to get representation from other parts of Ohio. I just want to make one comment too. It's important that we stay in Ohio when we do this kind of survey because the regulations related to zoning are very state controlled. Ohio has a very strong, they call home rule. They give a lot of discretion to the local. So to go to other states, that the information may not be as meaningful. I just wanted to add that. So here it is, owner consent required. Burton, interestingly, the individual was not specified, but the district was 50% or more of the owners had to approve. Euclid, owner consent required. Gates Mills, owner consent required. Hudson, no owner consent for a district, but an individual owner was a yes. Medina, individual yes, more than 25% of owners for a district. Newark, individual yes, more than 50% of owners. And then finally, Willoughby had owner consent required. So that was the information we gathered. Does the commission have any comments? I know I'll move to Brooke also did some work on this too that she can talk about, but did anybody have any comments on this survey?
Can you hear me, Ken?
Yes.
My picture did my thing disappear. All right. Anyway, now are you saying that you only specifically listed those that required consent? That's why there are no non-consent in this list?
No, what we did is we surveyed.
The opposite, I mean, the opposite. I noticed every one that you listed there did not require consent. So I was just asking if that's why they were listed.
Ken, if you look at the bottom,
Yeah.
if you look at the bottom of the list, there is, they've listed 7 communities that have landmark ordinances that do not, or that do require owner consent.
Yeah. Okay. I did see that, but all right. Okay. Never mind. Thank you.
Yeah, it was very interesting to us. I did not realize that no owner consent was so overwhelmingly used compared to requiring owner consent. But I'm looking for any other comments from the commission or feedback related to this.
I appreciate the thoroughness of the list.
Yes, I thought it was really interesting to see how many don't require owner consent. I think we all thought we might be an outlier, and in fact, we are an outlier by requiring owner consent. So switching it makes us more in line with the norm.
One suggestion I had was with South Euclid. They, interestingly enough, they have a provision that says the owner has a right to appeal a commission designation decision within 60 days. If you're sharing this owner consent list with council or others, I may not want to put that idea in their head if you're going towards owner consent.
Right.
And they are not a CLG. I understand they're a neighbor.
And Wendy and I, kind of prior to getting this list, had kind of thought, okay, if we get pushed, this is the direction we would want to be going towards, is there would be basically an appeals process for the designation. So if council comes back and says, nope, we need owner consent, we want this kind of an owner, not really an owner consent, but an owner rejection.
Right.
So that was kind of our thought, was that would be our plan B, not our plan A. Another thing I kind of want to touch on that we talked about a little bit after the meeting, I think Eric was the one that brought this up, is that City of Cleveland's a really great example, right? They have a lot of historic districts, and they treat their historic districts as an overlay. So, it's almost a part of their zoning map. Obviously, the difference with City of Cleveland is if you are a landmark, you go to landmark for design review, or if you are not a landmark, you go to regular design review. That's one of the things that separates how City of Cleveland treats their landmarks. But, zoning does not require owner consent. Zoning requires a public reading when they change zoning. So owners don't have any, ownership of what they are zoned for. So that's also kind of a mindset maybe to get in your head, is that this is really just an overlay to, I think, give owners a better understanding of what is required for them to review. We have design guidelines that help them understand before they would come before the city with any kind of changes. I actually think it's a plus to know you're in a historic district as far as design review goes. So that was just something that, I wanted to share with you guys as we're kind of thinking about next steps. Brooke, do you want to share what you learned as well?
Sure, yeah, I looked at some of some other cities. I looked at Cleveland and then some other cities outside of Ohio, just to see if I could find some mechanisms that they incorporated into their process to, I guess, sort of allow the homeowner or property owner to voice their concerns or opinions on the landmark process. So even though it didn't require the consent of the property owner, it still gave them that opportunity. So most of them just required like an additional public hearing. So I thought that could be something that we could look into to maybe make them more comfortable with that lack of consent requirement.
The way we have this ordinance set up now is they are already going through 2 public hearings. I do think it's a good idea to request written comments. It looks like we're listening to the owner, but again, it requires the owner to participate in the designation. It's, Brooke, weren't there some other approaches in here? The first one was Cleveland, which we used as a model. Chicago, if the owner declines or fails to give written consent to the proposed designation within the time limit, the commission will automatically schedule a public hearing. You all are actually a step beyond that because you require a public hearing. The process for non-consensual designation requires 2 additional public hearings. I think landmarks, that must be Landmark Preservation Commission for the designation. Non-consensual designation also requires a super majority affirmative vote of 6 members. That's another way to do it. This is Excelsior. I'm sorry, where's Excelsior?
I think that's Minnesota. I'm pretty sure.
Minnesota. Yeah. Residential nominations. They'll review it in 45 days. Continue reviewing the application to deny based on available. Provision does not apply to nominations by the commission. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the variety of ordinances. That's all I have to say.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
One thing that struck me from that meeting was everybody that was voicing their concerns about owner consent, it was all about residential property. Have you read anything where there's a difference between how individual residential property is treated from other structures?
I have not. I'd be concerned about doing that because of the Equal Protection Clause. Okay, because you start to treat one group differently than another, and I think that's why we're not seeing it.
Okay. And then my other question is, which I've now forgotten. Hang on. It'll come back to me in a second. Did you ever see any language where owner consent is preferred, but if it's determined that the property is endangered in some way, like something that again develops like a level or a tier approach?
We sort of have that in the ordinance now because we've put in a pending landmark application that puts things on hold if there's demolition if there's an application that goes in, there's a demolition that's threatened, the application is on hold until a determination is made if it's a landmark, and then you fall into the demolition process we've set up with economic feasibility and those requirements that we've moved to.
I just wondered about like designation without owner consent if it's determined that a property is endangered.
Again, that equal protection thing, I want to be careful that we treat everyone the same, or I feel like we're entering into, that's what makes me a little about a tiered approach.
Okay. I'm just thinking if we got pushback, what? If we get pushback,
the next step is what Diana's talking about. You could set up an appeal of the designation within 60 days, or you can go the other way and set up a situation where you have to require someone for a district to object. We had talked about paralleling it to National Register criteria, which is basically an individual can object or 50% of the property owners in a district can object, but that takes you down a level. You're losing control then.
Yeah, National Register does not require consent. So you don't have to consent to being National Register listed, but you do have the opportunity to object, which is different, right? Like they have to, as Wendy said earlier, they actually have to participate. They need to sit down and write a letter and be active. And I think that's an important component. Is it's one thing to not like it. It's another thing to do something about it.
I will say that the board felt strongly about owner consent, right? From the beginning of when we've come to those meetings. I think the survey surprised me even a little bit that there is a lot of support for owner's consent with CLG. You start to talk
for no owner consent.
For no owner consent, pardon me. And you start to frame it in light of this is the same authority. This is the Penn Central case we talked about, right? That you are totally within your rights to designate properties as landmarks and come up with ordinances that do a different type of design review. It's just like zoning. There's some material here to support you if you really want to give it a shot. If you don't, if there was a lot of feedback from Ambler Heights, the other way to do it is to extend an olive branch, say we heard you. We've added an appeals clause where there are 60 days appeal on an individual or historic district designation, which we'd probably add 50% language in there.
And it doesn't have to be 60 days. It could be 15 days. It can be 10 days from the designation. You know, you can offer it and still keep it limited.
For 30. I mean, I wouldn't be against that kind of opportunity for the owner, but they would have to work hard to put a presentation together that would convince us against designation, I think.
I would also, I think that we had a fair amount of people from Ambler Heights that came to that, and I'm not to our last public meeting, and I'm not sure how representative they are of the entire community. So part of me feels like it might be a knee-jerk reaction to adjust unless, and I'm open to feedback from the rest of the commission, but to adjust what our preferred draft is, given the narrowness of the perspective of most of the people in that room. I think it would be interesting to present to council and then hear what kind of feedback we get from the broader community. What do you think, Tom?
Well, the one thing I was going to say is the biggest, other than the opposition to no owner consent, it was basically based on fear. And they seem to think that we all want the Gill House. And to me, that's an extreme that I actually am not interested in either. A lot of that is a recreation. It's not even necessarily historic, but, I think that's one of the things that we need to deal with is like basically making it clear that we aren't, the historic preservation police, I mean, I'm an architect. I like new stuff too. And I like seeing when old and new really, work together and make something even more interesting than either on their own. So I don't know how we, get that message across. I know it's in our guidelines that probably nobody read.
It might be helpful if we could brainstorm a few good examples of, again, like I would look towards non-residential property. I think about the property on Mayfield at Vandemar in Mayfield that had the theater in it. I don't remember if that building had a name or not, but that wasn't designated. The owner didn't feel like finding tenants. They were able to demolish it, and then they proposed putting in a 24-hour gas station. And that street, the neighbors on that street all came together and opposed it, but now all that is a giant grassy lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And like that would be a great example of something that if we could have designated that building over the owner's consent,
Right.
you know, we could maybe have something there now.
I think
if
the
we
other
could think
thing
of some
that,
more.
as a commission, you need to be conscious of is that you need to actively start landmarking. Waiting for a building to come to you and at the 11th hour recognizing, and I know you can't decide where that's going to happen, right? But I think actively landmarking, you know, having a goal every year that you're going to try to do a district, or, you know, in an 18-month time, you're going to do a district, or you're going to seek out specific houses and try to get those landmarked. I think part of the reason why it's so knee-jerk is that you haven't been landmarking and you have been waiting. You've been waiting.
I'm going to push back on you because we haven't, we've landmarked several buildings and residential properties in the last few years.
Historic districts.
We need districts.
Historic districts, we have not because we're waiting until we have all our ducks in a row. I think is really.
So I think that's something that you guys, as you kind of fight back to council, is you can say, we do have goals to landmark. We try to letting them know how frequently you are trying to landmark or what your goals are to increase the historic landmarks, so that it doesn't seem that you are just waiting for someone decide to tear down a building to landmark it, because that's not what you're doing. That was a rare case that happened, but it also helps if you are, you know, there was definitely seemed like there was interest for Forest Hills and that area to be, at least according to Fran. You know, Maisie, you and I have talked about our neighborhood being a historic district. I think there'd be great interest there. So just again, that's something that maybe as you talk to council, maybe have those goals set. I think Wendy had shared with Eric that you have the opportunity to go after a CLG grant to help you with those historic districts. And, you know, that if you have a couple of historic districts you'd kind of like to start with, that you would like to seek that funding so that you can do the district. So these are just parts of things that you could be saying to council if that kind of concern comes up.
Right. And I think
reminder as well, the next grant is due April 30th. So there's time to quickly squeeze something in, because I do think doing a nomination for a district is a considerable amount of work as a volunteer commission. You may want to seek out a grant for help with that, but.
Correct. Yes, especially if there isn't already a National Register district filing. I do think that it's not a bad idea, maybe as Landmark Commission, if we are upfront that we have, with the work that we've been doing in response to what happened in 2019. I mean, we say that, but I don't know if there's that's included in some of our talking points, that there was this issue and we've learned from that, and here, you know, we've made the guidelines, we're improving the ordinance so that it's more understandable, all those pieces and parts that we've been doing. If that makes sense, we can work on something along those lines too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that saying that this is just the ordinance, right, is another step in that process to strengthen the Landmark Commission and to protect the resources in Cleveland Heights. That is exactly what you're doing. And it didn't come out of Ambler Heights. That was this, you know, anomaly that occurred, but it made you very well aware that you have resources that you want to protect.
Right.
I do have one question. With the ordinance change, would we still have the separate reviews where Landmarks Commission reviews a landmark and ABR reviews a landmark?
That's a question for the city. Eric.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Currently, yes, but we are working on streamlining the process and making that abundantly clear.
Yeah,
that it would be
because
a separate review.
yeah, because Cleveland, basically, if it's a landmark, just Landmarks Commission reviews it, which is probably another selling point, or at least an example that we're trying to streamline things for property owners, that they don't have to do both. I know Cleveland is also, right now, their landmarks districts each have their own review boards. And they're in the process of consolidating that into zones, if you will, where Little Italy, Hessler, they all have one board review, not all their own. So
Yeah, and those boards are recommendation only, so their review is a recommendation.
Well, ABR is as well. It's the Planning Commission that has every power, as I've learned being on an ABR there. They can just ignore whatever people say.
I want to mention one more thing about the appeals of a designation. The other reason we had thought about to not go that direction is the appeal. Who do you appeal to for a designation? You are appealing to BZA or the council, who has we're back to that issue of who has the expertise. And usually BZA and council and communities I've seen any kind of appeal, they're not too thrilled with that. And I don't think anybody would be, for them to assess that.
Yeah.
I mean, Wendy, I think we're talking about it will act as an appeal, but it's not really an appeal. It's that you have the right to stop the designation. Yeah,
I was also weighing it against South Euclid, though, that's on the other side, that there's a ruling and then there's an appeal within a period of time. And I don't think that's the direction to go. If we could stay on the other side of the fence with owner notification and maybe, the way we're set up now with 2 public hearings, there is, and a real effort to find that owner, there's a real opportunity for an owner to be heard.
Right. So, Danny, Margaret, Ken, Tom, what are your feelings about making changes to the draft that we are at right now? The one that was presented to the public prior to the meeting. Do you think we need to make changes? Do we leave it where we are and just have some fallback positions if we need them?
I mean, so we're saying no owner consent, but there's a process for review afterwards, after we designate a property, right?
No, right now the ordinance is there's 2 public hearings. We make every effort to notify the owner.
Well, the public hearing would be an opportunity for an owner to ask no, right?
Right, and then ultimately, though, you all still have the right to designate it regardless. So you could have the public hearing and make a decision to not designate it because of that owner rejecting. So the power still lies with you. That's the difference right now.
And that would be within a vote, or would it just be was that something we would vote as a commission and then it would get landmarked?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of that. I mean, that's how Cleveland Landmark Commission is, or a lot of other commissions, where it has to be a majority vote of the commission to agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we designate anything right now.
If you want a reference of some sort, if you go back to the PowerPoint presentation that we did at the public meeting, there's a slide that consolidates those steps to landmark designation. That might be a good refresher or a reference if you're trying to share with council members on how is this process going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the big selling point of this is actually creating a framework for public discussion in a formal setting. To Margaret's bringing up the Mayfield Center Mayfield Theater, was it? Or
That was what it was.
like there was no opportunity for anybody to, in any formal setting, voice their opinion against demolition. Basically they submitted for a permit and tore it down.
Well, and the other thing that may happen in that process is you may have an owner that rejects, and someone might offer to buy their building and they may unload it happily, right? So that's, there's other opportunities that come up with these hearings. And so, it also gets them know if, I know again that Amber Heights kind of, we heard both sides of the story. We had several people came up and said they were bullied. They refused to sign the petition. They did not agree with their neighbor. They were not happy about their neighbor. So, that room was definitely split in half. But I do think this process maybe also educates. That's what you guys do every time you have a landmark meeting with homeowners. You're educating them. So.
And I think for sure with any designation that we do, but particularly a district designation, we would include well in advance public meeting, just informational kind of public meetings and information that will get mailed out. And I wonder if there's some way that we can include that. I'm looking at the steps.
Number 2 is written notice that is sent by mail. So that's step 2.
Right.
So first you guys, come up with the idea, and 2, you start notifying. So, you obviously could have more than what's on this list. This is the minimum requirement for your board.
And this would be not listed out in the ordinance, but I think one of the things that we recognized after the 2019 process was there needs to be, sorry, my dog is making terrible noise. But there needs to be more information, opportunities for us to share information as opposed to, this coming out of the blue. So for instance, Diana, if we decided maybe you and I wanted to approach our neighbors that we wanted to list Inglewood as a local landmark district, we would probably have some sort of, come to my house or your house to learn more about it. And here's what it is. And here are some handouts about what it means to be a landmark and blah, blah, blah. And it would be a more informal session. And I think that would be our goal anyway, particularly for districts, that we would enter it lightly.
See what the interest is, because obviously you don't want to pursue it if you've asked a handful of neighbors at a block party and they're like, no way, right?
Correct. Right.
So you guys aren't going to waste your time knowing that you've got all these owners that aren't interested, and you'll move on to the next area that you're interested in listing. Right. So. Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest things about Cleveland Heights, right? Is that neighbors actually talk to one another.
Yeah, so I think that it wouldn't be something that we would lay out inside the ordinance language, but that is the intent of the Landmark Commission, that there would be, we would provide informational handouts anyway about all sorts of things, but this would be something that we would have informal conversations and information sessions with. Much like we did with the Victorian, which is an individual landmark, but similar to a district in that there are multiple owners. We had that information meeting.
Have we ever had any property delisted because of an owner request or something they did?
Right now, the only way to delist is that you have to show that the property no longer meets criteria for which it was designated.
Right.
The only landmark that
unhappy with us so far.
Yeah, the only landmark that's been delisted is the artwork that was at the JCC that was moved out of the community.
Right.
That was one more point I was going to bring up. We had another question about, well, what about this 2/3 to de-designate the landmark, a listed landmark. And that is, the answer to that is that's not because the owners come around and don't want it anymore. It's related to the property not meeting criteria. Or wait a minute, I believe the 2/3, now I have to check that. The 2/3 might be 2/3 of the owners don't want it anymore. That language is still in there. And
Yeah,
wasn't-
we had set it at more than 50% need to object, correct? For
correct.
designation, or more than 50% needed to say yes for designation?
2/3.
It's 2/3.
To
It's greater
delist.
than.
No, but that's for undoing it, right?
Right.
What is it? Creating one is
No owner consent.
no,
And
okay,
the
right.
question came because there was one woman who stood up and said, well, 2/3 of the property owners can get together and petition to delist, but what about an individual property owner? I think it's very unlikely you're going to get 2/3 of a district to get together and decide to delist. So whether that clause stays or not, I don't think is a big deal. I do
Again,
think
they have to make effort.
Right.
And I can say honestly, if our neighborhood was listed and a neighbor came to me and said, I want to tear down my house, so I'm going to try to get all my owners to not be in landmark. I mean, I know I'm a historic preservation professional, but I kind of feel like, no, we became, we're a lot of people live in landmark districts, or particularly in Cleveland Heights, the National Register districts. That's a benefit. So, and I do think that Ambler Heights is an anomaly. I don't feel that is a good representation of how Cleveland Heights, the thought mindset in Cleveland Heights.
Right.
So I think you should test the theory.
So I guess I'm
by certified, so it's really tough.
But it's your decision. That's just my opinion.
I guess I'm a little confused about what you were saying. So the person who approached you was asking if I have an individual house within a already designated local landmark district, can I delist it? Is that what she was asking?
No, there was a woman who stood up and referred to the 2/3 section about the district. You get 2/3 of the owners to submit a letter, certified letters saying they want to be delisted. They're delisted. Her question was, what do I get as an individual owner to get delisted? Was her question.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I guess it would depend on what the purpose is, right? I mean, if you're demoing just to demo, but if you're building a new house in its place that fits and that gets reviewed, I don't know, right? It depends on the house and the situation.
And right now, you guys have that control.
Yeah. Okay, so Landmark Commission, where are we at? Leave it the way it is right now and just continue to have fallback positions, or make changes before it goes to council?
I'm in favor of leaving where it is and then maybe considering like that appeals approach as a fallback.
Right. Even though we kind of have it in there, it's just not blatantly stated as an appeal opportunity, that hearing.
Okay. Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Leave it as is and then have the fallback position?
Yeah. because
Ken,
I-
where are you? Oh, go ahead, Danny.
Oh, no, it's okay.
The only other thing I would consider is, and this is probably bigger than this group, Eric, is maybe we do just have the review of landmarks by Landmark Commission. That would simplify things too for people.
What do you mean?
Well, they don't have to go to ABR also.
Oh, you mean when projects are, yes. Instead of having them go to both meetings, that they could just come to Landmark Commission instead of ABR.
It's
But
an
that
idea.
would yeah, that's out of our hands, I think, at the
But
moment.
it would show a streamlined process again.
And I
Because now,
think when, sorry.
we have an added layer. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you guys forward your recommendation to council, there'll be an accompanying memo, I guess, from staff. And I think we'll say in there that we're working on streamlining the design review process. And so one of the things we want to do is update the building code, which is where the ABR is located, and make that change there because that's where it says they review all these things. So I think we can do that without touching the landmark ordinance. But I did want to just, before you guys move on, throw out there, because there were a couple of ideas that we were banting about at the end of the meeting, including with City of Cleveland, some fees associated with landmarking. And we had shared that with Wendy and Di, but just maybe you guys can speak to that a little bit and just see if the commission wanted to integrate that in to the ordinance.
Wendy, do you want to speak to that?
So City of Cleveland has a fee schedule that's attached to reviewing certificates of appropriateness, not the designation portion of what you do, but the certificate of appropriateness, and it had a series of fees based on the percentage of the budget for the alteration or new construction that's going on. We talked to Carl, and the city decided that they are not doing it because the money wasn't coming back for their use. It was going into a general city fund, was my understanding from that conversation. That is something that you could add. I don't know if you need council approval for fees, but we could include it and get the discussion going. Mm-hmm.
And those fees could be used to help you landmark districts. So, or to provide a grant base for perhaps someone wants to fix up their, I'm just going to use front door, right? They want to do some kind of pressure-minded element to their landmark building. So it's providing some kind of small incentive to landmark property owners. And again, it may take 5 years to get those dollars up to provide some kind of small grant for landmark properties. But that was one of the thoughts that we talked about. The other thing was to make sure this was, we all heard about the people who tore down a home and built a new home were not living in the neighborhood while that was happening, and they were not subject to the environmental impact and the health impacts. And so one of the things I think I'm hoping Eric does in all demo, and I assume this is the case, is that there is a level of environmental review that occurs during a demo process. So if you are, this is an example, so you're tearing down a building, that there are certain points during that demo process where there is an environmental check. Someone comes out and checks the air quality. And if the air quality is a certain point, you have to stop and wait till the air quality gets to a tolerant level. I don't even, this is like way outside my purview, but it kind of discourages demo simply because it could elongate your time period. And everybody knows once you have a construction loan, it's costing you money every day you're not occupying the property. So, and I think that just speaks to Cleveland Heights sustainability, Cleveland Heights idea of, environmental, we're a tree city. So there could be something added in the demo process to, and I think someone even talked about like a neighbor doing renovation demo,
Right.
causing some health
That was
problems.
my takeaway, that this might go on the list of items that we would refer to perhaps other departments. This, to me, appears to be a wider issue for the building department in any kind of renovation and construction, that gentleman had such a horrendous experience. It's not just the fact somebody tore down a landmark. It would be any kind of construction. You all have that sustainability ordinance in place. I think that would be something to refer to the building
Pass on.
department, planning commission, or, planning and zoning to bring some kind of action forward related to that. But yeah, and we could say it started because this story was shared with us at a public meeting at Landmarks.
So we
I
do
al-
have, oh, sorry, I was going to say we have Jessica and Katie.
Go back to the Cleveland thing, but go ahead, Eric, stand this.
I was just going to say we have Jessica and Katie on to help represent planning and ABR. So I thought it might be a good time if they had any thoughts to jump in. But sorry to interrupt, Wendy.
For planning, we have discussed construction or project checklist regarding environmental impacts. I think, Eric, that was based off of the New York State kind of environmental act that we're looking at. And so that is one thing that we have considered at the Planning Commission.
Was that public meeting recorded the other night? I'm sure it was, correct?
Yes.
So Jessica, that public meeting, there was a gentleman that went on for quite a while about what his experience was. Might be something to share with your commission as well. What I've also pulled up is the city of Cleveland fee schedule. I don't want to take away from the importance of the environmental sustainability issue. If anybody has any other comments before I share this fee schedule. No? Okay. This is to give you an idea of what the city of Cleveland has in place under their ordinance, certificate of appropriateness review fee. They're charging, more than $5 million. 306, they've got a base price plus 2% over, 5 million. They have an elaborate a fee schedule in place that might be something for you to consider moving forward, maybe now.
Is this fee schedule discounted to a regular construction fee schedule at all? Like, obviously there's
that I don't know. This is in their landmark ordinance and related specifically to a certificate of appropriateness fee. I don't know how it relates to, I think you're asking building permit fee or.
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously a discussion at the end about what the financial incentives of being a landmark are, and maybe this is an opportunity also.
I wonder if it is better to stick with what we've done at the moment and think about doing a fee schedule in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the fee schedule is, and Eric, I'm ignorant on this. Is there a fee schedule regardless if you get a permit for if you're not a landmark? Because we wouldn't want to punish landmark.
Right.
Like if you're a landmark, you have to pay a fee, but if you're not a landmark, you have to pay a fee. So I think that would be seen as a punishment versus. So I guess that's my question: is there a similar type of fee for non-landmark properties?
So there are building permit fees, but there's no certificate of appropriateness for non-landmark properties. But I think the exemptions below in C help because it's the vast majority of buildings actually wouldn't have to pay this fee. It's those larger commercial properties.
Oh, right.
Oh.
Okay.
One other thing.
Something to put on your agenda.
One other thing at the end of that meeting was that I remember we talked about with Carl was including a salvage or requesting a salvage plan with the demo, with a request to demo. Because we say we want to know what site plans are, but maybe we should also be requesting the salvage plan.
I think
We could add language if you want to put that in. We could add language to this and just simply put that language, present a salvage plan, and which may be no salvage plan. Could be a salvage plan.
So,
right.
We'll just put that language.
I think it would be great to add that in, and then But my concern about the fee schedule is that it will become another issue at the moment. And I don't know that we need to add more issues to us at the moment. I don't know, Eric, what's your feeling on that?
Well, my feeling is, and we're having this argument in another part of the code, is when you put it inside the code, then every time you change the fee schedule, you have to go back before council, and then it becomes a public fight every single time. So doing the fee schedule outside of it. So I think, yeah, let's keep it the way it is. But we probably at Landmark Commission meetings should discuss this further, and then we can just change that upon adoption at the Landmark Commission.
Okay. Landmark Commission members, what kind of support materials would be helpful for us to have on hand so that we can respond to friends, neighbors, council members who reach out to us? I think, that one page that you, Wendy, were just showing from your presentation about the steps for landmarking would be helpful. I wonder if it would be helpful to have some of the early pages from the design guidelines as standalone pages, like what does it mean to be a landmark, and what's the difference between a landmark and the National Register. That might be helpful. Just some of those info sheets. What else?
All of those are in the PowerPoint. So you guys, if you want a cheat sheet, just print off the PowerPoint because it's all there for you.
We did pull some materials out of the design guidelines.
Yeah, we did.
Tonight that talk specifically about the design review process. So we put the landmark designation steps in, but we also included the design review process. And you might want to skim through there. Yeah, maybe they're just pages you could run.
The one thing it would be good to have like a cheat sheet, if you will, of things that we actually review. I know that we have that somewhere, but the big one would be we don't review interiors.
Yeah, and again, that's in the design guidelines.
Yeah, I know it is, but
yeah, I mean, there's a page. I think you can rip out the page, kind of thing.
Right.
Well, so I can't because I don't have that knowledge or ability to isolate a page out of the design guidelines. Is that something the city can do, or so that we can just have a one pager that is what do we review and what do we don't review, and a one pager that is this is a landmark versus a National Register district. And do you see what I'm saying? I know it's in there. I'm just wondering if we can have one pagers of the different topics. Someone who can do
Yeah,
that.
I think we can excerpt these out.
Yeah, this might be helpful. I'm trying to make this page a little smaller, but then I think you can't see it as well. Whoops. Historic design review, we're trying to really make it simple for them because it's right.
Yes.
It's hard to anticipate every item, and the interior thing, the way some of those landmarks are, there's very few. If an interior is designated, though, you do have the right to review it. Let's not emphasize that.
Right.
But these pages might be helpful. These very simple pages, property changes, exterior, new construction. This is when you need a certificate. Maintenance and repair are not part of that process. I don't want to give them then historic review, certificate of appropriateness application form where you get it. Well, that's something else. Those might be helpful. Those 3 pages right there might be helpful.
Yes.
Maisie, what was the second one pager that you requested?
Well, what did I say? Landmark, local landmark versus National Register. What the process is.
That page.
Local landmark versus National Register. I think we had that.
Yeah, you just passed it.
It's in the design review for sure.
Here it is, right here. So we have
next page.
One more.
There you go.
Yes, like this one is helpful, and then what gets reviewed by us would be
There's the
helpful.
review, there's the designation, there's the review, there's a, go look at the design guidelines. You can read all about architecture in your house and
Yeah. And
that kind of-
I'll read, Brooke and Eric, I'll look at the design guidelines again, and maybe other commissioners, if there are specific pieces and parts in there that you think would be great to have as one page or handouts, let me know. Ken, did you have any other comments? Oops, I'm not hearing you, Ken. Ken, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Now you're muted.
Totally muted. Okay, Ken, we definitely can't hear you. Try again. No, something's wrong with your connection. I'm sorry, Ken. Ken,
There's
we
a
can't
little
hear you.
wheel
Sorry.
that's settings, Ken, on the upper right. If you click on that, it'll give you speaker options, and maybe try the different speaker options. Nope, still muted.
All right, Ken, send them to me in an email.
Well, while we
I wish
wait,
I
for
could live, but I don't.
I wanted to ask a question. So you
Wait,
guys are going to send off the final version to SHPO probably any day now, right?
Yeah.
Good
Any-
for
Because you guys can make changes after that, because they
Right.
never ask for the final one. So
So what I was thinking is we'll probably get some comments from folks. I know one of the woman who's the attorney who got up and spoke pretty early on wanted to make some comments. She reached out. So at your next meeting, maybe it's a agenda item of comments received on the landmark ordinance, and at that point you can decide to forward it as is to the to council, or to spend more time with it or fiddle with it. But we can let at least the CLG grant get completed. Yeah.
Ken, email me if you have a question.
You're doing
okay, so
chat.
effort.
or Eric,
Yeah.
what it sounds like you're saying is we are saying to Naylor Wellman, go ahead and send this off to SHPO, and at our next regularly scheduled Landmark Commission meeting, we will have time for review of the public comments, if there are more, and opportunity. Are people speaking then, Eric, or no?
We can decide if we want to do that. Again, it'll be a regular public meeting of the
Right.
Landmark Commission where you don't necessarily have to let people speak.
Have public comment, yeah. But they can have sent in information, and we know that people sent in comments. Okay, and then at that meeting, we can vote to pass this on to council, would be the
Yeah.
next step.
Or if you wanted to spend some more time with it, then you don't have to vote then. At that point, we will have fulfilled the grant, which is the most important
Okay,
thing, right?
which is the point.
The
Then
deadline
I think,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and maybe at our next regularly scheduled meeting to continue the discussion, maybe we can have samples of what maybe, I'm looking at you, Brooke and Eric, but samples of what some of those individual one-pagers might be that we could use as support materials. They could also be sent along with to council, in addition to, here's a link to the design guidelines, but we know they're not going to read the whole design guidelines, right? So trying to make it as simple and easy for them to access information as possible.
one more comment, and I regret not writing it down, but there was one thing we were going to add to the ordinance. Does anybody recall what it was?
About the salvage plan
Salvage plan, thank you.
I have the
or demolition.
There was one thing that Carl brought up at the end of the meeting where, I don't know if this matters, but basically if an owner does, is okay with the designation, there's no hearings. You know, there's no reason to have them. So I don't know if that needs to be memorialized in the ordinance or not. Maybe that's an incentive to not argue.
So we don't have
Yeah,
to.
so Eric, that was an idea that, you know, if the owner consents up front, or, you know, they've requested it, like for instance, the Centrum Theater person is requesting it, why would we need to add on extra meetings than we already do,
Right.
since we don't need to wait for their consent? I don't know if we need those meetings for neighbors to say something.
There might be others that have an opinion about what's going on. It pulls you away from looking as transparent as you were looking. I'm not saying it's a bad direction to go, but you were already tracking the owner down for written consent, holding a public meeting, announcing that you're thinking about doing this designation. Then you do your report, put that together, and then you have a second public meeting saying, here's the designation. Anybody else got anything more to say? And then you have 60 days to decide. So the first meeting, you take the temperature. You can have a 5-minute public meeting.
Right.
If nobody's here
I guess
to talk,
that would be
meeting open.
right.
If anybody has any comments, public meeting's closed.
Yeah, and I think you will have these people who will come forward and want to be designated, but I think the other nice thing about the public hearing, it gives you an opportunity, if other people are paying attention during your meeting, you know, if my neighbor's getting landmarked, wait, I might want to get landmarked. So it is an opportunity for you guys to educate for every time you do a designation and celebrate those designations. So.
The only concern I might have, Eric, but I think we could manage it with just when we schedule things, is if we needed to streamline a designation for some reason, like if they were trying to go for funding or something, and we would need to go quicker. But I think we could manage that just by when we schedule the meetings, right? We haven't prescribed what the time frame is for our public meetings within the ordinance, have we? Okay.
It's more like a minimum, within a time period, you have to do it. So if you make that time period shorter, that's okay. You're meeting the ordinance. You just can't go beyond the time period.
The limitation would be you have regularly scheduled meetings every other month, but you could schedule a meeting in between.
Additional.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is in line with what
we have done in the past, where we've had special meetings. They're public meetings, but they're, you know, if someone, even for a certificate of appropriateness, just for a repair, that we've had in between because of timing. So, okay.
And we do this in zoning. I mean, it's we hold a public hearing no matter what, whether anybody shows up or not, and it's just an equal process throughout.
Okay. Any other comments?
Maisie, what you're talking about with the particular sheets that you wanted to have available, that was for council, like for when it's presented to council? Are they going to be presented with the list? Is that going to be part of it? The CLG list of like other cities that don't require owner consent?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
It would go to council, but it would also be, you know, for us to have, if we are meeting with a neighbor about it or a member, or just a general member of the public, we would have these handy dandy fact sheets. And I know that Naylor Wellman created sort of a memo of the changes, right? Which is helpful. And I think we're good. Anything else we need? Eric, should we be worried about this?
No, I think you guys are doing everything you're supposed to. Like we said at the meeting, you're taking it seriously. You hired experts in this. You've held at least one public conversation. You'll probably have another one in one form or another. And you're going to forward your recommendation to council. What they do with it, it's up to them. But, you're sticking by your guns of what you believe is right. And I think that's the right approach.
It's important that you've had SHPO review, 2 reviews on this by the time it goes to council. You've had a consult with the law director, and you've had 2 public meetings.
Yeah. It might actually be helpful to have a handy dandy list of things that we've done during this process.
I think that's also on the PowerPoint. I think it's at the end.
Yes,
it was scheduled. The PowerPoint's really helpful because it's kind of concise.
We've got all that stuff in it. Yep. So that'll be good.
You guys are sitting there traumatized. Couldn't see the PowerPoint.
That was just the second one.
I was too worried.
Thank
trying
you
to
all
look at
for
all the...
really, I have to tell you, it's been a pleasure working with all of you, and there's a lot of mindfulness here, and I appreciate it. So it's been wonderful.
You have been truly wonderful to work with. There's nothing like sitting in a room staring at people when there's no feedback. And everybody's like, well, whatever you want to do. Let me tell you, it's the opposite here, and it's great. So thank you.
Is it? Yes, it is.
We're still to go. We'll still be around as you go through council and all of that, but maybe this is our last formal gathering. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a really lovely process, and I'm excited
thank
that
you.
we have an end product that we are able to talk about. So that's good.
Okay. Have a good
All
night.
right. I think we're
All right. Thank you.
all set.
Bye.
Meeting adjourned.